Awesome. I forgot to record the last one, so I'm very happy that I remembered. So welcome, y'all. I'm Molly Flanagan. I'm the Individual Artist Program Director at RISCA. I know most of you already, so I'm so happy to see you all here for the General Operating Support for Artists Grant Workshop today, June 1st, 2022. So who or what is RISCA? The Rhode Island State Council on the Arts is a state government agency. We get our funding from the Rhode Island state government. So the state legislature allocates money for us in the budget every year. We also get a partnership grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a federal agency. And we do things like provide grants like this one, as well as technical assistance, professional development, and staff support to a very broad group of folks and entities across the state of Rhode Island. It is important to know that, again, we're a state government entity of state government, so we're a public funder using public tax dollars. And in addition to individual artists, we have some other program areas, and they all have their own person running these programs. So we have nonprofit organizations, individual artists, education with a focus on K-12, folk and traditional arts, and arts in healthcare. And I will say this, that in all of our granting programs, art is at the center. So though we may be granting to healthcare entities, it's for an art project. We're an arts funder. We fund art programs. We fund art projects. The general operating support for artists. So I'll say, before I get into this grant, I'll say some things. We recently completed a multi-year overhaul of the individual artist grant making programs. So all of the old individual artist grant programs are gone, and they have been replaced by 4 new programs, of which this is one. So we have, in addition to the general operating support for artists, we have the Community Engaged Project Grant and the Make Art Grant, which had deadlines at April 1st and will have deadlines again at October 1st. And then we have the Opportunity Grant, which is a small grant that will be available on a rolling basis. So you can apply anytime, and we'll give a certain number of awards monthly. It is tentative that the rollout of that grant might be delayed a year or two due to capacity issues. I'll know more by the end of this month, but look for that coming soon, maybe. And then the general operating support for artists grant. So GOS-A is designed to be the sibling grant to our general operating support for organizations. Artists need general operating support too. This is all of the pieces of art practice that are less fundable and less legible to folks outside of the arts. You know, things like rent and utilities and health insurance and food and childcare and supplies or equipment, right? So this funding is unrestricted. It's a 3-year grant. So if you get this grant, you'll get the amount of funding, the same amount of funding, $6,000 each year for 3 years. To support artists to work towards longer term goals. Again, the funding is totally unrestricted. You can spend it on whatever you need to spend it within your goals to work towards what you need to work towards. This is not project based, so don't come asking for a specific project that you'd like to do with this grant money, right? It's unrestricted. It's for your art practice as a whole rather than one specific project piece, which I will talk more about very shortly. The other piece to this, in addition to 3 years of funding, is that there is a grantee cohort. There will be 4 meetings each year, so you'll have a total of 12 meetings in your 3 years. And the meetings for the next year are November 4th, February 3rd, May 5th, and August 4th. If you know already that you cannot attend one of those, do not let that stop you from applying. We will figure it out. There will only be 3 grantees. We will find a date that will work for everyone. That's just to give you all an idea of the time frame that these are in. In addition to those 4 meetings, which will just be the grantee cohort and me, you will be required to attend 2 professional development things, workshops, webinars, events, classes over the course of the year. RISCA generally offers between 10 and 15 of those for free every year, and you won't be limited to RISCA only offerings, right? You can take whatever professional development trainings you want or need, but you have to do 2. And the goals of this are really to develop community cohesion, as well as something that I heard from artists over and over and over again in my time here, which is a need for peer support and peer mentorship. So more connection among artists to hold each other accountable, to talk about what you're working on, to talk about challenges, to problem solve. So that's what the intention of these meetings is. The first one will start with a values identification and goal setting. I think at least one of you has done that workshop with me before, and I'm offering it again in June. It's something I like to do for myself at least once a year. So there'll be some light programming in addition. Okay, here are the 4 questions that I've gotten the most often in the past month and a half since we started pushing this grant out. What if I applied for a Make Art grant or a community engaged project grant at the April 1st deadline? Great, I'm so glad you did. That has no impact on this application, and if you get this grant, it has no impact on the past application. You will be ineligible for the Make Art grant or community engaged project grant moving forward. So starting at the October 1st deadline if you receive the grant, but it has the April 1st grant cycle and this one have no impact on each other. So if you applied for a Make Art grant or CEPG, please feel free to go ahead and apply for the General Operating Support for Artists grant. It's very likely that you will not know if you received the Make Art grant or CEPG before July 1st. We never know though, the state budget could get passed on time this year. The second question that I've been getting a lot is this grant the right fit for insert specific project here? So this is not a project grant. It's for your artistic practice as a whole and your goals and sort of dreams for your artistic practice as a whole, rather than one specific project. So no, it's not the right fit for XYZ project, but if you have an artistic practice, then it's right for you as a human. How do I ask questions? Get me to read a draft or meet with me? So first of all, you're doing great because you're here, so you know how to get some access to RISCA. During the grant season, my capacity gets crazy town, so I only do meetings via online sign up. When we get towards the end of the meeting today, I'll drop links in the chat for how to sign up with that for things. You can also email me if you have specific questions. You can email me the specific that you feel like don't need a meeting. You can email me specific questions. I'll get back to you. If you want me to read a draft, I can. It's totally part of my job. I don't get to make any decisions, so I can read a draft and give you feedback. I will say my capacity is pretty maxed out right now, so I'm doing my best, but I'm already behind. I'm already running a couple days behind on people who are sending me drafts. But again, you can just email me and either attach a copy of your application or just say, hey, it's in the system. I can go look at your draft in the system. I get to see everything in there. And then, am I eligible? And the answer to that is probably. The basic eligibility criteria is that you have lived in the state of Rhode Island for at least 2 years, that you are a legal resident of the United States and have a tax ID number. This actively includes folks who are here with green cards or on work visas. Anybody who can work in the US legally and has a tax ID number is eligible. Lived in Rhode Island for 2 years, you must be at least 18, and you must not be in a degree-seeking arts program. So what this means is if you are studying illustration at RISD and hoping to get your bachelor's degree, you are not eligible. If you're studying engineering at New England Tech, you are eligible because that's not an arts degree seeking program. If you're taking some classes through RISD CE or even at the Steelyard or somewhere else, that's not a degree seeking program, you are eligible. So it's if you're sort of a degree seeking student for a specifically arts degree. Those are the basic eligibility criteria, and then you must be a practicing artist, which is defined very, very broadly. Okay, the application is fully online. In the second half of this workshop, we'll walk through the online application and talk through each question. And we'll also do a little, here's how to get to the application bit. So hold that for later. And then again, there is help and support. I'm here for helping. I'm here for support. Just know that I'm super busy right now. So I'm doing my absolute best. If you get in touch with me on the day the grant is due, I might not be able to help you. But if you get in touch with me today, I probably can help you, but not till like, I was going to say next week, but I'm actually taking a week off, y'all. It's going to be amazing. A week and a half from now, I can help you. Okay, so here's how the application process works at RISCA. The first thing you should do is read the grant guidelines twice. And I am going to, if I can get the right window up, questionable. Here is a link to the grant guidelines. We ask that you read them twice because many of the questions that you will have to ask are in there. The second thing, which is super optional, is talk to a staff member. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you want to know more, you can always reach out via email with specific questions or sign up for a one-on-one meeting or the drop-in office hours. Third piece is create a profile in Foundant. If you've applied for a RISCA grant as an individual artist in the past about 7 or 8 years, you already have an account in Foundant. Use that. If you don't, make a new one. It's very easy. It's also very easy to reset your password because people, when you don't touch a system for a year, lots of people don't know what their passwords are. So it's super easy to reset. Then step 4, easiest part of it all, write the application and gather all your support materials. Piece of cake. Then 5, here's something really important. Hit the submit button before the deadline. The grant system will close down and not accept your application if you hit it after the deadline. And then you wait for several months. Here is why you wait for several months. So this is what happens after you hit submit, after the clock strikes midnight on July 1st, is staff reviews all applications for eligibility and completeness. By staff, what I mean here is I will read every single application and review it for eligibility and completeness. So that alone takes a little bit of time. The second piece is that the panelists review the applications and recommend the funding. I'll get to this. This has like 5 slides of its own just on the panelist process. The next piece is that I will write panel notes based on the number of applications I'm expecting to get and how the panel process will work. I will only be offering panel comments to the 3 recipients. There's just no way I can write panel comments for what I anticipate to be about 200 applications. The next step is that the council will review and approve the panel's recommendations. Then we'll tell you, hopefully sometime in late September. Then we'll mail you a check. Takes about 8 to 12 weeks after you submit everything. And then after that, you'll participate in the cohort meetings, do your art making thing, and then you report back once a year by July 31st, which we'll talk about much more in depth if you get the grant. Okay, if you receive the grant, you'll read and follow the instructions, which is my favorite instruction to give. Fill out your grant agreement, register with OSP, let me know if you have questions, let us know what's happening. And then if you need support or anything else outside cohort meetings, etc., you can always email me. I'm around all the time. Okay, here's the real part. Here's the hard part. If you don't get the grant, which is going to be most people, I'm expecting about 200 applications. But since this is the first time we've ever had this grant program, I really have no idea. I can tell you that I already have 7 applications submitted and 38 in draft as of about an hour ago. There are only 3 grants. So keep applying and know that it's really genuinely not about you. There legitimately just isn't enough funding for all of the amazing artists in Rhode Island. And that's true of every single grant program that I run. We just have way more really cool projects and really cool people making really cool stuff than we have money. And then you'll know probably sometime before our October 1st grant deadline. So then we'll start working on those CEPG and Make Art grants for the October 1 grant deadline. All right, so here's how the panel process works. So the general operating support for artists will be adjudicated in 2 panel rounds. The first round will go like this. First, I'll invite and select panelists. This process has already started. I already have about 10 panelists who have agreed to serve on the panel. They will receive the guidelines, the same exact grant guidelines y'all get, and the training packet and the rubric, the same exact rubric that's on our website, and attend a virtual 90-minute training session. Those pieces all start after July 1st. Then the panelists will receive, after they've done the training, they'll receive all of the applications via the same online grant system via Foundant. And they'll score, each panelist will score about 20 applications in the online grant system. They'll use that evaluation rubric that's on the website. I'll show you where it is in a little bit. And each application will be scored by at least 2 panelists. Then I'll take all those scores and identify the top 20 scoring applications. All right, a bit about the panelists for round 1. Each application will be scored by 2 panelists. Each panelist will score about 20 applications. The panelists are based both in Rhode Island and out of state. All of the panelists work professionally in the arts as artists, curators, presenters, arts administrators, that sort of thing. They are all have deep understanding of the arts broadly. They may not have a deep understanding of your specific practice, which I'll talk about more later. And these panelists are recruited and assembled with an eye to diversity in many forms. This means, yes, racial diversity, but it also means age. It also means disciplines, specific discipline. It also means geography. It also means aesthetic. It also means where they're at in their career. So it's a very broad group of folks, all of whom are experts in the arts. And RISCA staff, meaning me, I do not get to have an opinion or make any decisions. I exist only as a facilitator. So, and that's a facilitator to help y'all apply, and then a facilitator to help the panelists make the hard decisions. But I don't ever get to have an opinion in this process, which is a good thing. So once we've identified the top 20, we'll start some of those same steps over. Again, panelist invitation and selection by RISCA staff. Again, that's already started because these 2 rounds are going to happen very close together. Again, the panelists will receive the guidelines and the training packet and the rubric and attend a 90-minute training session, and then they'll get their 20 applications. Then they'll review and pre-score their applications at home. We estimate that panelists spend about 30 minutes on each application, reading, looking through the work samples, etc. Then once we finish that, the panelists will meet for an all-day review session via Zoom, where they will discuss and rescore each application. Then the total or average scores are tabulated and displayed for the panelists, and the panelists will recommend the 3 grant recipients to the council. They'll pick 3 essentially. These panelists, there will be 5 for this round, and all 5 will read all 20 of the top applications. 3 of them will be living in Rhode Island. 2 of them will be from out of state. Again, all of the panelists will work professionally in the arts in some way and will be very diverse along a variety of factors. I'll remind y'all that panels are different every single grant cycle. We'll never have the same panelists. We'll never have the same panel makeup, which means the decisions will be different, right? They'll vary based on the panel composition. Everybody looks at rubrics a little bit differently. And for the second, but not final time today, I will say again, RISCA staff does not make funding decisions. So again, I didn't do it. Okay, questions about the grant. Then the next section we'll talk about some grant writing tips, and then we'll walk through the grant application. So questions just about what I've talked about so far. And you can feel free to unmute yourself or drop a question in the chat.
I just had a quick question. What happens, and this is totally hypothetical, what happens if you receive the grant and then in the middle of it decide you want to go back to school? Do you have to give the money back, or how does that work?
No, so if you decide to go back to school mid-grant, mid-3-year funding period, if you decide to move out of state mid-funding period, you just don't get the future grant payments. So if you move or go back to school during the first year of the grant period, you'll get the first grant payment, but not the second and third.
Okay, thanks.
Because we know that you all cannot promise us for sure that your life will not change in either of those ways for 3 years. Like that's just not realistic.
That brings up a question for me actually, because I know it said if you live out of state, you're not eligible. What if you move over the border to Massachusetts, but your studio and you're still making work in Rhode Island?
No, if you're a Massachusetts resident, you're eligible for Massachusetts grants and not Rhode Island grants.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately that piece is about where you live.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, because I was keeping my studio in Rhode Island. The other question, if the grant isn't, based on like a project-based grant, what is the panel scoring the applications based on?
Mm-hmm. There's in the third section, we're at the end of the first section of this grant workshop. At the beginning of the third section, I'll show you the rubric, but the rubric is on our website. So you can look at the exact rubric that the panelists will use.
Okay, thanks.
Who's next?
Molly, it's Treyer. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. My question was, actually, as you know, I'm a photographer and visual artist, but I am planning, or I'm considering going back to school for an MFA in creative writing. Would that make me ineligible for this?
Yes, it would. Creative writing is an artistic practice, y'all.
So even if it isn't the discipline that I would be applying with, it would still make me ineligible.
Yeah, it's still an arts degree program.
Okay. All right, good to know. Thank you.
Actually, on eligibility, I think I know the answer, but I'm just gonna go ahead and ask. But if I'm taking on a full-time job, but then I have I'm still doing my art practice, that still count?
Yeah, RISCA does not care how you're making your income.
As long as
the
practice is continuing to go.
Yep. In some way, right? We don't require that all or even most of your income comes from, or even any of your income comes from your art practice, right? That's,
oh, I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
it's the practicing artist requirement is more about the making, intentionality around making, and then also hoping to or working towards making income, all or some of your income from your art practice. Yeah.
So then clearly if it's the sole proprietorship bringing something in, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, we want y'all to be able to like survive and thrive. And we know that for a lot of folks, their art practice alone won't do that. And in a lot of places, I just had this wild conversation last week with a bunch of other grant makers for individual artists that were saying that in some definitions of artist for grant making purposes, you have to make a minimum of 40% of your income from art making. And it doesn't even include things like if you're also a teaching artist and you're teaching classes or workshops or any of that, it has to be from like selling your work. I was like, that's wild. I will never do that. That's terrible. That's so limiting. Okay, Eliza, I see your hand up.
I think Trier also has a question. Maybe Trier had their hand up first.
Trier asked her question, unless she has another
Oh.
one.
No, I
asked.
already asked it. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just need to lower my hand.
Yeah, my question is around kind of the fluid boundary between art and design, and whether, like you mentioned, the panelists are practicing artists. So maybe just, I would love to hear a little bit more around like what practices are most encouraged.
Wow, what practices are most encouraged? I will non-answer that and say that RISCA and this grant program defines artist very broadly. Knowing a little bit about your work, I would say your work definitely, to me, would fit. I would call you an artist. Many designers are also artists. Does that help or not help?
Yeah, that helps just in terms of, you know, where we're situated in terms of like freelancing design work versus like seeking out gallery shows, kind of understanding that.
Yeah, art making is, for the purposes of this grant, is very broad and actively includes literary artists, performing arts, visual arts, teaching artists. We're actively including teaching artists as a form of artistry. So don't feel like the folks in the graphic design world are excluded, because they are not, or textile design.
Thank you so much. That helps.
Okay. Here's our grant tips and tricks section. What if I'm late? Nope. So as I mentioned earlier, the grant system, which it's based in Minnesota, it's all online, it's a whole external system. It will shut off that grant process at 11:59 p.m. and 1 second. I wish that it would do it once it ticked over to 12, but it doesn't. So don't wait till the last minute. Submit it at least 5 minutes ahead. Yeah, so it'll just close. And if you're late, you're late. Tech problems aside, so plan ahead for that. Also, if you have a tech problem at 11:50 p.m. on July 1st, I probably will not be awake to help you. But if you have it at 4 p.m., I probably will be. I definitely will be. Here is my favorite grant writing tip. Thoroughly read and follow the directions. So this is a really important one and will really set you aside above about 50% of the folks that are applying for grants. And that's not just grants for me, that's grants in general. If you really thoroughly read and follow the directions, this includes things like answering the question that is asked, but it also includes things like looking at the eligibility, making sure your image files are the right file format and size and follow naming conventions. It's all of those little things that will make my life much easier and will prevent me from having to email you furiously, not by furious, I mean quickly, not angrily, on July 2nd or sometime that week saying, hey, you submitted your whatever in Pages format instead of a Word doc or a PDF, and the online grant system literally cannot decipher it, so you need to resubmit. So please thoroughly read and follow those directions. Here are some other tips. Everything else is secondary to reading and following the directions. Address the grant application questions directly and fully, which is another sneaky follow the directions. Have an outsider read your application. It's very possible that of the 2 or 5 people looking at your application, they may not be deeply familiar with your specific art practice or your specific discipline. So know that you're writing for somebody who's an arts expert, but may not be an expert in printmaking, in glassblowing, in ballet, right? So know that, have somebody else read your application to make sure it's legible to folks outside of your sort of immediate sphere. Here's an important one, and this is linked to us being an arts funder and not a small business funder. Fully address the why. We care as an arts funder about why you're making art and who you're making it for, and why you should be doing this. So make sure you're thinking about that in your application and in your practice. Look at the evaluation rubric before you write your application and refer to it throughout the process. There's a reason that we put it in a bunch of places. There's a reason that I'll tell you about it 47 times during this grant workshop. It's the exact same evaluation rubric that the panel will send to the panelists to score your application. Okay, more tips. Don't wait for the last minute. Again, I get super busy right before the grant deadline is submitted. About 50% of applications come in the 24-ish hours before the deadline, which is totally nuts, right? So if you get to me a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead, now I'll be able to answer your question, though I already have a backlog. But if you get to me the day before or the day of the grant deadline, I may or may not be able to help you. Again, communicate with your program staffer. It's literally my job to help you. Just know that 100 other people are also asking me, so please be kind. And then I can give you feedback on your application again, but not the day of the deadline. Image submissions. So this includes video and audio as well. I should rename the slide. Follow the directions on file size, format, and naming. Follow the directions on how to submit the work samples and how many in their length. The work samples for this grant program will all be submitted via a Google Drive folder, not directly uploaded onto your application. This enables y'all to do things like submit video, submit higher resolution photos, all of those things that are important to artistry, but make sure you're paying attention to the limitations around that and how to do that. A reminder that the panelists are looking at their application on their computers at home. So if your work's really complex, include detail shots. If the work is large in scale or dimensional, include an installation shot or a video of the piece, right? Even if you're like a making three-dimensional visual art, you can take a video of the piece now. You don't just have to submit images. Okay, need more help. So I have drop-in office hours. You can email me specific questions and then you can sign up using Sign Up Genius. And I know some of you already have for a one-on-one 30-minute meeting with me. And I just put a whole bunch of links at one time into the chat for all of those drop-ins and the sign up. I will say about the 30-minute slots, I usually add more as I get further along, as I see things fill up, but I know that I'll do my best to add more, but I may not be able to just because of capacity, because I've already pretty much maxed out my schedule. So sign up for a Sign Up Genius now if you want to. And if it gets closer to that date and you're like, I don't really need this meeting, or you know you're not going to show up, please cancel your registration so someone else can sign up. Okay. And then I will also do one plug. We have, if you use Facebook, we have a Facebook group called Artists and Creatives of Rhode Island. It's great. It's a professional development and peer support space. So not the place to talk about your gallery opening, absolutely the place to ask for some help finding an affordable studio, or somebody asked today about where to find some sort of specific material. I'll also post professional development events and things like this grant workshop in that meeting. Okay, questions about that part of the question? Yeah.
Is there a recommendation, practical recommendation about the length of, well, two questions about the length of audio and video individually, or the full length of what your sample should be, combined sample?
Yes, there are very specific limits in the grant application to the lengths that you can submit.
Okay, but what do you think, in your personal opinion, what do you think? I mean, say it says 5 minutes, right? But in reality, in your experience, what do you find really works?
That's a really hard question, and it really varies applicant to applicant and panelist to panelist. Some panelists will watch the whole thing. Some panelists will not only watch the whole thing, but then Google you and watch other stuff. And some panelists will watch 1 or 2 minutes and be like, no or yes, right?
But
So
shouldn't they have to watch the whole thing?
we're asking them to watch the entirety, look at all of the support materials. So I would say, as long as you are within the boundaries of the support materials, the time limits are pretty modest. So feel free to take up that whole time limit, right? Because I made the time limits with the panelists in mind. So feel free to take up the whole time limit that you can.
Okay, thanks.
Any other question? Oh yeah.
Yeah, hi Molly. When you said the tax ID number, is that something other than the Social Security number, specifically the Rhode Island tax ID number?
No, tax ID number is for folks who may not have been born in the United States or are not naturalized citizens. So they have a taxpayer ID instead of a social.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, Molly.
Hello.
Hey, I was just curious if this video would be like accessible somewhere after this.
Yes,
Okay, thank you so much.
I'll probably include, so I'll upload it to YouTube tomorrow and I'll include it in a follow-up email. I did record a version of this grant workshop a couple of weeks ago that's already available. Let me send you a link. So there's a version of this that doesn't have any other people because I forgot to record the first grant workshop, so I just did it by myself. But if you go to that link, it has under grant workshops, it'll have links to the recording I already did, and then I'll be posting this recording probably sometime tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you so much. I was just like I came out of work at 4, so I had to like rush to try to get on the Zoom call. So I missed a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure I could catch up on all that.
Yeah, you're fine. Record it. I always record it. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, so the next bit, I am going to share my screen again. And what we're going to do is I'm going to navigate to RISCA's website, show you RISCA's website, where to find these guidelines, where to find the rubric. And then additionally, we'll then look at the application itself and walk through the questions. So RISCA's website, you can get there either by risca.online or arts.ri.gov. This is what the homepage looks like, except this little strip at the top, which is my editing capability. You'll click on grants here. And then we'll go to general operating support for artists. So here is the full grant guidelines. This sentence here, ooh, oh, my computer is being fritzy. Right here is the links to the recordings I did a couple weeks ago of the grant workshops. So it's in 2 parts. So we're in this is the beginning of the second part. So if you want to look at that, that's right here, my little bio. And then I'm just going to scroll all the way down through all of this information. And here is some really valuable stuff. a PDF of the grant guidelines in English, a PDF of the grant guidelines in Spanish, a PDF of the grant guidelines in large print English, the grant question list. So this you can use to guide your application if you want to write it offline or in Word. The question list is there. And then the evaluation rubric. Which will open. Here we go. So here's the evaluation rubric. It's your grant application will be scored out of a total of 20 points, 10 points for artistic impact and growth, 5 points for artistic vibrancy and intention, and 5 points for community of practice. So this rubric is here for y'all, and please use it. And this is also the rubric that we'll send to the panelists to review your application. All right, so I'm going to navigate back over here to our main grants page. And then you'll see at the top, we have 2 grant portals. The first one is click here to access the grant portal for organizations. You do not want that one. You want click here to access the grant portal for individuals. They look very similar, but you'll need the individual portal. So this is what the Foundant portal looks like. You know that you're in the right place because it says right here, portal for individuals. Okay, and this is what will show up when you log in. So as you can see, I don't have any applications in process. You can see my past 2 applications that I did not hit submit before the deadline for CEPG and Make Art. Those are obviously fake applications. And the easiest way to do this is you're just going to click apply right here. There's only 2 things open for application right now. Teaching artist roster. If you're an active teaching artist, I encourage you to apply for the roster. And the general operating support for artists. You can preview the form like this, or you can just hit apply and it'll take you right to the application. So some pieces to note, the guidelines are up here. All the way at the bottom is save application. This is really helpful if you don't want to write it all in one sitting, right? Or if you want to write it all in one sitting and then walk away for a day, come back, read it over again, and do some edits. So you can just save your application. It'll save a draft without submitting it. You do need to eventually come back and hit the submit application before 11:59 p.m. on July 1st. So we'll go back to the top here. And normally the contact info will be filled in with your address and phone number and all of the pieces you use when you sign up for Foundant. We ask that you use the name that will be on your W-9 and be on your paycheck for the contact info. That's just so that we can really expedite and make the payment process much easier on us. And we'll get to other things in a moment. So then the first pieces are the eligibility screen, right? So US residency. Are you a legal resident of the United States with a tax ID number, either a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number, which includes refugees, immigrants, and temporary residents, but does not include people in the country on a tourist visa or undocumented. Then Rhode Island residency. You must have lived primarily in Rhode Island for at least 2 years at the time of application. Are you 18 years of age or older? And then are you currently enrolled in an arts degree seeking program or attending high school full-time? So this is one of those questions that trips a lot of people up. And the reason for that is you want to click yes on these 3, right? US residency, Rhode Island residency, and being 18 years of age. And then no on being an arts degree in an arts degree seeking program. And people just get on a roll and click yes there. And then I have to go back to them and be like, I'm pretty sure you're not in an arts degree seeking program, but you messed this up on your application, so you have to fix it. Okay. And then the next section is artist information. We ask for your preferred name. Again, we know a lot of artists, for a variety of reasons, do not use their legal name. That's totally fine. We want to be able to call you what you want to be called. So we ask that you put your preferred name in here. Pronouns is not required, but strongly encouraged. And if you have questions about what that is and why it matters, there is a link there. And here's the meat of the application. So one of the biggest changes that we have to our individual artist grant applications this year in the reworking of them is that you do not need to write your answers. You're invited to submit your answers to these narrative questions in one of three ways. You can write them like you normally would. You can also record either audio or video of yourself just answering the questions. We're not talking about a sizzle reel. We're not talking about anything with edits. We're talking about you sitting and just speaking what you would have written. So you can answer all of the questions in any of those ways. There are a character count and a time limit count. So make sure you're mindful of that, because if it's over the time limit, I will kick it back to you in the same way that the character count would as well. Okay, so these questions. Who are you as a person and as an artist? What is important to you? Tell us a bit about your art practice and art form. And what do you want to spend the next year focusing on in your art practice? So I would say something like, I'm Molly. My current art practice is creating lots of little things out of cement, primarily planters and things that are plant related. For the next year, I really want to focus on figuring out how to ramp up production and getting better at selling my work. This is, and then I talk a little bit about why my art practice is important to me, what it reflects, how it's connected to my values as a person, that sort of thing. So an ideal response is approximately 3 to 4 paragraphs, 3,000 characters. Yeah? Okay, impact. Why is this grant important to you as an artist and a person? How will it move your artistic practice or the business supporting your artistic practice forward? So this is really what will be able to happen for you if you get this grant. Why is it important? Defining success. This is my favorite question ever. I think it's really, really important. And I'm really excited to be asking it on a grant application because I firmly believe, and this is one of my big soapboxes when I talk about supporting individual artists, is that I can't define success for you. And every single artist has a different definition of success. Success is different for every single one of you. So we want to know what that is. Everybody wants slightly different things or drastically different things. We want to know what your goals are, what you hope to learn, and what success looks like for you. 2,000 characters. Okay, and this is the question that I've been getting the most questions about. So if you are confused by this question, know that you are not alone. And know that it is very, very likely that the language of this question will change before next year's application. So community of practice. Describe your community of practice and how you interact with this community. Is your community of practice your artistic discipline? Who is your audience, your field of study? Is it place-based, geographic, or a broader community? How do you envision your participation in the grant program and cohort will enhance your community within the state of Rhode Island? So community can mean very different things to very different people in very different contexts. We encourage you to define your community in a way that makes sense for you and your artistic practice. Your community of practice, you can think about it in terms of who are you making work for, who you're making work with. So if you are a metalsmith who is really active in SNAG, which is a National Metalsmith Service Organization, then probably that's part of your community of practice. If you have a studio at Nicholson File and are really interacting with the other artists in that studio building a lot and working together and collaborating, and they're supporting you, you're supporting them, there's sort of a ebb and flow of information and friendship and artistic support, they're probably part of your community practice. If you work in a specific geographic community and your goal is to really support the folks that are around you in a geographic community, that part is your community of practice. So it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it really depends on what your practice is like and what you are like and what your goals are like. So define it the best you can for you, and my guess is you're going to be right, and that there's not a right answer. Does that help at all, y'all? Okay, good. I'm getting some nods. Okay. So then, the next piece is support materials. So we're asking for a resume, CV, or an artist bio. You don't need all three. Pick which one you feel works best for you and best represents you in your work. Don't stress too much about this. Other things are going to matter more. The second piece is a link to an artist website. If you have one, if you don't have one, that's okay. Don't stress. Don't feel like you have to throw together the perfect website before this grant application is due. But if you have one, put it in there. And then again, artist social media. So if you have social media accounts where you're sort of interacting with folks as an artist, please submit links to up to 3 social media accounts. I personally do not use social media at all for my artistic practice, so I wouldn't submit anything there. I would just submit my website that I did make in an hour on Squarespace. So again, if you have them, submit the links. If all you have is a personal Facebook or personal Instagram where you're not sharing very much work and it's really about you, then maybe don't submit that. Then here's a big one, which is also why you shouldn't wait till the last day to work on this application, a letter of recommendation. So we're asking for a letter of recommendation, a 1-page letter of support from someone you respect and that can speak to your potential as an artist. This could be a student, this could be a colleague, this could be a mentor, this could be a curator, this could be your studio mate, this can be so many people. The thing that we want is that it's from someone that you respect and that it speaks to your potential as an artist, right? We're not going to value, the panel isn't going to value a tenured faculty at RISD over one of your students, right? That's not, so don't feel like you need to get the most whatever version of prestigious you're thinking of. Don't feel like you need that. Get a letter of support from someone who knows you and your artistic practice well and that you respect. And again, one letter to whom it may concern. Don't make the person work too hard or stress too much. Okay, and then here's the work samples. So Lori, here's the answer to your question. So all of these files should go together in one Google Drive folder. You may submit a maximum of 3 of the following: up to 10 images, up to 15 minutes of video, up to 15 minutes of audio, up to 30 pages of writing, and up to 1 full manuscript of dramatic writing for performance. So Lori, you could submit 15 minutes of video performance and 15 minutes of audio performance and 10 images of you performing some of your cooler, more site-specific stuff, right?
Holy moly.
Yeah, we made it better, y'all. We made it so you can submit more work. I'm very happy about this.
That does help a lot. It helps to show your full picture as opposed to trying to pick out what someone might like.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
And the other thing about submitting it via Google Drive is that there's not a file size maximum. So that means that your files can be nice and big, and you know, for those of you who are visual artists or photographers, you're not limited to a really low resolution photo of your work, which is so good, right? So yeah, no file size maximum of 3 of the following. Does that all make sense, y'all? And again, you can submit up to. So if you only want to submit 10 minutes of video and that's it, that's totally fine, right? We have an upper maximum, not a lower maximum, not a minimum. Okay, and then these questions are relatively straightforward. Who are your elected officials? So this is going to be your state representative in the General Assembly. Mine is Acosta. He's somewhere. State senator, again, local at the state level, and then US representative, it's going to be either Cicilline or Langevin. We've changed these to a drop-down menu, which is great. And I'll show you how to find yours really quickly, because this is always a question we get. So I clicked on this link right here to look up who your elected officials are. Please visit the Rhode Island Secretary of State website. Boop. This is what it looks like. You can click find your elected officials, and then you'll just enter your information here, and it will show you who your elected officials are. And then the bottom piece is assurances, which essentially means you are saying that you are telling the truth and that all of the information there is accurate. Your artwork is not plagiarized, it's your work, and that you're eligible. So you'll want to click yes on that, unless it's not true, and then submit application before 11:59 p.m. on July 1st. And that is that, y'all. Now it's time for questions. And a sip of coffee. I muted you, Lori. You can unmute yourself if you want.
No, I was going to say it's much clearer than it has been in the past.
Yes.
That's what I have to say.
That's
WAV
great.
files, no MP3s. Yes. But yes, you've been very clear. It helps me because I'm always confused by what will people think? What does it mean? It's not so not so vague. I'm done.
Good.
Go ahead. Carry on.
Anybody else have questions, concerns, thoughts, feelings about the grant specifically?
Just, hi. Okay, so this round has to be submitted by July 1st, and I know you said you weren't sure, but so is this going to be something offered every year? Yes, every on a yearly, but not on a 6-month cycle like they were previously.
Yeah, so the Make Art Grant and the Community Engaged Project Grant will be offered every 6 months at the April 1st and October 1st deadlines. This will be just once a year, and the grantee cohort will grow. So there will be 3 grantees every year. So once we're in year 3, we'll have a cohort of 9, as opposed to year 1, where we'll have a cohort of 3. Will the art be yearly displayed? Yes. So what we are transitioning to, instead of the fellowship show that we used to have, is a work in progress showing that anybody who receives the Make Art Grant or is in this program, the General Operating Support for Artists program, are invited to but not required to show, and it will be a weekend really focused on works in progress, with artist talks, etc. And RISCA will do all the marketing and that sort of stuff the same way. May the videos of work samples be edited? Yes, absolutely. Please feel free to edit the work samples however you need to. I know that we'll have filmmakers apply. Their work samples will be, edited films. So yeah, go crazy with the work samples. Those are with the exception of the sort of maximum limits. Those are up to y'all to decide what they are. And I'll just say one thing super clearly for Jody. Creative nonfiction is included as an art form for this grant. I can picture you right now, and it's pretty great. Other thoughts? Yeah, please. We have another half an hour, so any questions you have right now.
Okay.
I mean, we'll end early if we end early, but.
You mentioned that you can have people read over your application, and that would be just by sharing your information with them and making sure that they don't hit submit when they review it there. So they would be an important detail, but they would actually be looking at the application. You'd be sharing it with them.
It depends on how you choose to share it with them. If you ask me for a review, I'll just I can go in the back end of the system and look at everybody's draft applications. If you're sharing it with somebody that you'll want to either save it as a PDF or something else, or you can actually, fill out the grant in a Word document and then copy it over, which is always something I recommend in case of technology failure.
Oh, so you could copy it as a Word document, the whole thing in. Okay. All right. That's an idea. Yeah. Thank you.
May I say something? And I found that by putting it in a Word document and even printing it out while it's in process, it's so much easier to edit and to read it and wrap your thoughts around it.
Okay. So.
All right, my thoughts.
Okay, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last thing I'm gonna put in the chat is my email address in case you all don't have it already. It's also findable in the grant guidelines and on RISCA's website. But I'm here to help as much as I can. Oh, yeah.
I have just one quick question. I was just rereading the rubric on the community of practice. Is there any preference towards community of practice that is Rhode Island based?
Nope. We want to know how this will, in the question there is a little bit, but it's not in the rubric. So we'll ask you to think about how it will impact the Rhode Island community, but the rubric itself in the scoring doesn't privilege Rhode Island community of practice above other communities of practice that you may have.
That's it, man. I have a question on that. Does that mean, because when you brought this up, Liza, it did make me think, does that mean that your community can be considered international, because I did before we did a lot of international work. Is that okay? Yes, your work and like Eliza's work too is, there are multiple members of this group whose communities of practice, I would say, would include international folks. Traer probably as well. Mm-hmm. Great. Oh my God, that's so great.
And here's a question. Are we allowed to apply to the other grants on the RISCA site, or does that depend on the grants? It depends on the grant eligibility. A bunch of them are for organizations, but so look at each of them individually, but we don't limit you to applying for only one grant. Unless you get this one, and then you can't get other ones, but apply for whatever you want. Yes, I would say the writing samples in the support materials section, the writing does need to be by the applicant because it's support materials, it's work samples of that artist. I mean, unless you're submitting stuff that's like explicitly, here's a catalog from a gallery show that I had and somebody wrote some of the descriptions in there, but it needs to be really clear. But I would recommend submitting just your own work samples. Yeah.
Yeah. And every time someone points out something, I think of something else. When you talk about work sample, like it had to be your own writing, but in say music or video, should it just be, yeah, collaborate? It can be collaborations. And does that, it's okay for that to be part of what you look forward to in a practice and all that? Not
Absolutely.
Just, this is my focus thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are primarily a collaborative artist, then you'll be including collaborative work samples. The grant will be for you based on your answers. But we're not, it's not limited like the fellowship.
And the panel knows that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, an interview would be fine. That seems like it would be very clear that it's, you know, somebody else and you. Can the art for samples have been commercial work? Yes. I mean, saying what commercial work is so like, what does that mean? But yeah, if it's your work, if you made it and you consider it to be the best representation of your work, absolutely commercial work counts. Podcast, motion pictures, we have a bunch of filmmakers. It's, yeah, whatever you're making.
I can breathe. It's so much easier to breathe now.
All right, y'all. Any final questions? Okay, I'm gonna